also ask you, Adam, Zoe and I were really impacted when you spoke at our company summit, really about your mindset in investing. Not even just from the church standpoint, but you personally. You were really early on one of the first checks into a technology company called Pray.com, which now has tens of millions of users really around the world. And you got in when there were like a couple users. I think you were like the first user.
Yeah, I really was. I was maybe like, besides the staff, the first human user.
So I think
outside of
this is
staff.
just this is gonna break people's mental models on so many different wavelengths right here of like, talk to us about your mentality around investing, but not just investing, super early stage investing, while also being a pastor and a shepherd and a church
Yeah.
leader. Because not only were you involved in investing, but also the church rallied behind it as well. Like, talk to us about this, because this is going to blow people's mind, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that comes from, my dad grew up in East LA, and so he was a Mexican from Montebello, and my grandpa was a plumber, my great grandpa was a mechanic, and so, when you're never taught about financial responsibility and it's never really been exhibited to you in any way, I think really, part of that credit had originally come down to my dad, who, as you're pastoring a minority community, and you're trying to teach people around finance, but you're burying people and they can't even afford their funeral. Siblings are fighting over the gold ring that dad had because that was the most, financially, worth thing that he had was, a $4,000 gold ring or $6,000 bracelet type of thing. And so for us, what I had seen, what was popular in more of the white evangelical church was this idea of leaving a legacy and financially paying things off. And for them, a lot of them had it in stocks, bonds, Roth IRAs, and stuff like that. Well, for us, we could do that, but then we thought to ourselves, well, if everyone else in tech right now is investing in these kind of these companies that are rising, why could we not do that on a kingdom sense as believers? And why could we not actually receive more with our little? Because we're kind of behind the eight ball. We're teaching financial literacy and all these things like that. And so we actually have to be able to do a lot with a little rather than having a lot and doing a little bit at a time. And so for us, what we found was early on companies in their infancy that we would evaluate were the best risk versus reward for us. And when I talk about little, in our little sense, it was 100,000, 200,000, 250,000. And so we were saying, how could we find companies that are early onset where 100,000, 200,000 is a game changer for them, but that gives us more skin in the game so that we can leave a legacy and pay off our debt as much as possible and pass down to the generation churches and leaders and business entrepreneurs. And so we have coined it, we call it now kingdom investing, is making investments that are rewarded in the kingdom. Now, that doesn't have to be necessarily a faith-based company. It just has to be in the way that what's going to continue to happen is we're going to continue to create a savings for our church that the next generation is going to be able to pull from, particularly for us, for church planning. That's our end goal, is that we're going to be able to set up these funds that have returning dividends that we can actually pull from or pull loans against to plant future churches without putting weight on people to continually do fundraisers and say, hey, could we raise $500,000? Could we raise $1 million? Well, what would happen if we had a fund that had $10 million in it that every single year we can pull a few $100,000 or pull loans against that will allow us to do that new campus or renovate that new space without the risk of, well, what happens if the economy turns in this way in that sense? Because we have value already set up in those accounts from the investments we made. So some of them are faith-based companies. Some of them are non-faith-based companies. Some of them are put into funds. And so what that does is number one, it looked for me, how do I leave a legacy for for my children and my children's children? And then also, how do I ensure for our church that we're here? Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is for most minority churches, they will close down after one generation.
Wow.
After that Hispanic pastor or that black pastor becomes 70, 80 years old and he retires, they did not set up their church for success.
Mm.
More so, it's more so in minority churches than it is in a white evangelical church. That exists too, but it's really heavy in the minority church. So for us, we just didn't want to be another statistic. And my dad would always talk about that. It's like, we're not going to be another statistic. We're not going to be that next statistic that closes our doors. We're not going to be that next statistics of African Americans, Hispanics who didn't know how to run their finances, who couldn't keep something for more than one generation. We're not going to be those people. And so with him, it started from him leading with the vision. And then I think with now his son being me, he led with the vision. And then I came in with more of that solution, being his son, that also had a background in marketing and in tech already. And so what had happened was before I met the guys at pray.com 2 weeks prior, I had a meeting at Facebook where I basically pitched to them pray.com as a feature in Facebook. And I didn't even know the Pray guys at that time. I said, hey, what would happen if you guys start to allow us to stream church services on Facebook? They weren't doing streaming at the time. I said, what would happen if you created these kind of rooms where churches could go and gather and it could be like a digital small group? Facebook pages as like the little page where you can communicate and all, that didn't exist at that time. They created that as a result of pray.com becoming successful. And so I was already in the sense of like my head was set towards finding solutions. Then I met the Pray guys. They had a better model than I had in my head. And I said, hey, can we invest in this? I believe this is going to go somewhere, because I truly believe that it was a solution that was needed.